Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our presentation today, Staying Ahead of the Application Game, Navigating the Common App and Your Application Timeline. We're excited that folks are joining us today. We're just going to give a couple minutes for people to join. And in the meantime, I'm going to launch a quick poll just to get us started and see who we have with us today. Go. Super quick 2-question poll for y'all. So, all right, looks like we have lots of parents, we have an educator, a lot of 10th and 11th grade associations here. Perfect. It's crunch time. Awesome. Give us just a couple more seconds for people to join. Awesome. All right. Let's see. Cool. All right, for anyone who just joined, thank you so much for joining us. We're just launching a quick poll while we let folks kind of trickle into the room. Just kind of want to find out who we have with us today, parent, student, educator, and what grade. It looks like we have a lot of 10th and 11th grade interest, so that's perfect. This is exactly kind of the timeline we'll be talking about today, so that's perfect for us. All right, cool. Looks like we're kind of slowing down, so I'll end this poll and I think we'll get started, Sarah, if you're ready.
I'm ready.
All right, awesome. Thank y'all. Okay, perfect. All right. So like I said, thank you so much for anybody who just joined us. Thank you so much for joining us today with our presentation from ESM Prep about staying ahead of the application game, kind of giving you just an overview of things to be thinking about right now as we prepare to, head into application kind of season with our juniors and some sophomores in the room too. So I'm Rielly. I'm a college coach here at ESM. Before I was at ESM, I was reading applications at Stanford, the very selective school there in Northern California. So definitely been on the other side of the desk, and a lot of the comments I'll share today will be from kind of that admission perspective. And then I wanted to introduce or allow Sarah to introduce herself as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sara. I'm also a college coach, college counselor at ESM. I have been working as a college counselor for over a decade now. I was also an English teacher, so talking a lot about the essays and crafting a narrative and a story is a big part of the college counseling thing for me. And yeah, I'm excited to talk to you guys about what's ahead.
Thank you. So we kind of like to start with a little joke, a little comic. We know, this can be a really stressful time. Even, early in high school, we're already kind of thinking about that next chapter. So we just want you all to know we feel your stress, we understand, and kind of give a little comedic relief before we jump into some, some details for you. All right, awesome. So we'll get started. We'll just jump right in. What is the secret to staying ahead on college applications, to minimizing the stress throughout this whole process? So here are just a couple tips. I think, starting with communication. It sounds simple, but it really is a huge piece of this puzzle. And it really kind of starts at home between parents, guardians, trusted adults, and students. Things like, are we on the same page about where we're applying, about what we want this next chapter to look like? Do we have an understanding of things like cost and affordability and what we're looking at as far as, the reality of paying for college and scholarships and financial aid and things like that? And then, down to things like application strategy. So understanding, the different rounds that are available to students to apply in. And just as a quick, we'll circle back to this, I'm sure, at some point, but as a quick sort of, definitions, early decision, right? So this is the round where some schools offer, it's a binding agreement where students must attend if admitted. The kind of caveat there is that you can only apply to, one early decision school. And the rest, you'd have to apply either in the early action or regular decision rounds. Early action is, again, another early round, but this is a non-binding option. So You can apply to as many early action programs as you'd like. And basically just you get your application in sooner, it's reviewed sooner, get your decisions back sooner, and you have more time to sort of decide where you're going to go. And then regular decision is what it sounds like, kind of the regular round. This is also non-binding. It happens a little bit later in the process. I will say we're finding more and more that early action tends to be a little bit more successful. So that's why we're helping you kind of prepare and plan for those early rounds now. And then there's also rolling admission too. So some schools kind of review applications as they're received, and release decisions on a rolling basis. So obviously kind of sooner the better in that context, so that there's more seats open and your chances are a little bit better for rolling admission. So continuing with kind of communication, that also has to happen at school, right? With counselors, with any advisors, asking questions like, what does the school submit on your side for the applications? So the counselor often submits something called a school report, which gives context about a student's high school. So this really helps admission officers kind of situate a student within their unique kind of school context. Also, it includes often things like demographics, course offerings, kind of, just more information about where the student's coming from in high school. Counselors will also submit official transcripts on behalf of your students, often evaluations and counselor letters, things like that. And then, asking questions like how do we request these materials to be sent? Sometimes schools use different platforms like Score or Naviance. Other times it's just, communication, email, communicating about the college list and things like that. And just making sure that your counselor or advisor knows your plan, is kind of updated at different stages of this process, will just make things a lot smoother when it actually comes time to kind of compile all the different pieces. So getting on that early is always great. Obviously, after communication is kind of organization. So I'm a big spreadsheet person. Sarah, I don't know what your kind of
Me
preferred
too.
organization tactic is, but you can do a big whiteboard, a giant post-it note, but some way to keep track of kind of all the schools you're applying to, the requirements at each, obviously deadlines, things like things like of that nature. You'll see that there's going to be a lot to keep track of as we go through this process. So picking your favorite organizational tool is a good first step. And then of course kind of dedication and independent kind of self motivation to get these things done on time is a huge thing. So really setting your own internal deadlines, making sure you're kind of setting aside a good portion of time per week to really start kind of chipping away at these different components that you'll eventually be needing to compile for the application. So getting started early and getting a good routine is a big piece of the puzzle for sure. All right, we can go to
Hey,
the next one, I think.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the framework of what is going to be contained in a college application, like what will be sent, and how admission officers might review some of that, some of those materials. So you can sort of divide the content into two pieces. There's the quantitative and the qualitative components of the application. So the quantitative is basically your data. So it's your GPA, your transcript, your academic record. If you're taking standardized testing, it's your scores. That's the quantitative component. So it's like the numbers of what you've achieved essentially and the courses you've taken. Then there's the qualitative component of the application. That will include the essays and the extracurricular activities you do both in school or outside of school. Those give color to you, right? You become a real person to an admission officer with that. You're sharing some insight about who you are, about passions you might have or curiosities. Things like the activities you select can tell a story about interests or things you're looking to explore, things like that. And same with the essays. You're going to reveal to them some components of you as a person, what you would bring to the table in a school community, aside from those numbers and achievements in that realm.
Awesome. All right. So what are the elements that we're really looking at here? So on our side, the first thing we kind of really need to attack is that school list, right? Which is plainly where we're planning to apply. I think, here at ESM in general, we like to suggest, 10 to 12 schools, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, depending on the student. But the most important piece is that this school list is balanced by level of selectivity. So, you have 3 to 4 kind of reach schools, which maybe are a little more selective. We're pushing it there, but we still want to try our hand, right? 3 to 4 target schools where you think there's a good fit there, a good chance of getting into that school of being successful in their process. And then 3 to 4 likely schools, which we feel strongly that we'll get in there. We're going to be happy if we go there as well, so that we kind of cover all of our bases. And I think, obviously no students college lists are exactly the same. There's different criteria that students have, different experiences that they're hoping for in this next stage. Things to consider when thinking about the list is, of course, the types of academic programs, student life, the different kind of campus culture and traditions, what kind of a day in the life looks like for students on that campus. Sometimes students, kind of choose schools based on size, because that can be a really strong indicator of the type of community you'd be entering into. And there's obviously a huge variety with schools ranging from, 1,500 students to 50,000, right? So those are going to look really different. So as we start kind of seeing what students like about different schools, you can really start honing that list a little bit and kind of, making sure we have schools that fit those criteria. And also, obviously, again, thinking about balance. Kind of like Sarah mentioned, then we'll need to build our narrative. So as we're thinking about where we're applying, we also want to think about, imagining yourself on that campus and also sharing your story through the different essays, the different components of the application as well. And then kind of be thinking about how you'll shape your story to fit that school, right? To really get the most, make the most of the program that you're applying for. And then, of course, there's the actual application itself, right? So we have the Common App, which is, the can apply to many different schools using just kind of one main piece there. And then there's the UC application for the University of California apps. Keep in mind, Georgetown has a separate application, although I think they might be doing away with that and joining the Common App, but there's, some different platforms to consider as well. And the app itself will have personal, family, educational info in there. And that really realistically you only have to fill out one time for the Common App as well. So those are kind of the components, the different things to consider.
So let's talk about what to think about right now as either a sophomore or a junior, I guess. So you want to think about your course selection for the future, for senior year or junior year if you're a sophomore. So colleges love to see rigor, meaning challenging coursework, and an upward trend, meaning you're increasing your rigor and hopefully increasing your GPA at the same time. It's important, even senior year, to still take classes that continue to challenge you. Because our deadlines are pretty early senior year, a lot of them are November 1st. A lot of seniors kind of think they can take it a little easy, especially second semester senior year, even first semester. However, you are submitting the current courses you're taking when you apply November 1st. And there are, they will be seeing your first semester grades. And once you enroll, choose your school, obviously your whole final senior year grades. So it's important that you're still on that upward trajectory, that they still see that you're hungry to learn, you're pushing to challenge yourself. It's not necessarily the best reflection of a person to see like, woohoo, it's time for me to relax. Like they want to see that you're still eager to grow and learn and curious about learning and all of these things. So you also want to think about, as you see the second thing under content, testing. That's our lovely tests, the ACT or SAT. Every college who accepts testing accepts both tests equally. So one component of testing is figuring out which test is the right test for you. And then there's test prep and actually taking those tests. So in terms of the timeline for testing, depending what math you're in, you need Algebra 2 for both of these to succeed math-wise on these tests. So if you're taking it sophomore year, you can start your test prep that summer between sophomore, junior year and target taking your tests earlier. If not, that's totally fine. You would end up taking your tests in junior year and potentially even one last final one in the fall of senior year, or like early, like August, there's a test date and stuff like that for senior year. But like I said, your first step would be taking a practice test or a diagnostic test of both tests, just to see they have different content, different pacing and time management stuff, just to see one of them might feel better for you. One of them might, even if you get similar scores, one you might prefer, but also one you might out the gate without studying get a significantly higher score on. Clearly, that's the test you want to pursue. Some schools are test optional and some require it. We normally recommend, because you don't yet know when it's time to start your test prep, where you're applying. You haven't created a fully fleshed, especially if you're starting summer between 10th and 11th, you probably haven't created a fully fleshed college list yet. So in order to keep your options open, it's nice to have that score in your back pocket for those test optional schools. If you didn't achieve a score that's going to play well at those schools, you just keep that score to yourself. And if it's going to, great, it's extra credit. We're going to send it, right? But it does keep the option available to you for any school that requires test scores. You will be able to apply. Okay. Another thing to think about is your extracurricular list. What activities you are going to be doing both inside and outside of school. So it's good to think about it, as it says on the little slide, in the context of your narrative. So think about the idea that when an AO, an admission officer, is reading your application, they're getting these pieces of you, right? And so if you take a ton of extracurricular things that are all focused on, let's say, biology and medical interests, that's going to clue them in as to what your major might be, as to what you might bring to campus in terms of your curiosities and your passions. So that doesn't mean that you should only do extracurriculars in one lane. It's also very cool to be interested in lots of things and excited about lots of things. And it's also cool to try and figure out what you might be interested in by trying different extracurriculars. So don't like hear me saying that and be like, oh, I got to pick a lane. Like that's okay. But you want to think about, what are my activities indicating to a college? And try and think about things like, can I deepen my activities? So instead of just being a member of a club, can I get a leadership role? Can I be secretary and then maybe next year be the president, or something like that? It's nice to show that you're not just interested on a base level, but trying to deepen or pursue those interests further. How you engage with those interests says a lot about how you might engage with those same interests on a college campus. That's what admission officers are thinking, at least when they view your activity list. And the other thing to think about now is starting that school list, depending on if you're sophomore or junior. It's huge to visit colleges. Even if you're like, I'm in California and I want to go to college on the East Coast. Visiting colleges in California that are accessible to you to go take a drive one weekend and visit right now, you will still, boots on the ground, be like, whoa, UCLA felt way too huge for me. I need to look at a smaller school. Or like Occidental was suffocatingly tiny, it's not going to work for me, or whatever it is. Even if it's not a school that you think you will apply to, you will pick up bits and pieces of knowledge walking around different campuses of, this was really appealing to me. I'm attracted to this type of community or something like that. And coming back to your school counselor or your ESM counselor and saying, hey, I visited such and such school and that one's not for me, but you know it was really cool. They had a program like XYZ. Do you know of other schools that have programs similar? And using those resources to help you figure out your school list. The idea would be, the goal would be getting that school list done junior year before you have to start all the application stuff, and using that summer between junior, senior year to write a lot of those essays and maybe visit some of those schools and confirm your list feels right. And so starting earlier in the process, sort of the generalized research of just visiting schools that you happen to be near, or thinking about what you might want in a school, is really helpful. And then later down the line, if you already have this list going, that's when you can talk to your counselor about strategy. Should I do early decision at any school? Because early decision is often strategically beneficial. Colleges love knowing that you're saying, you're my first choice and I will go if you let me in, right? So there's a higher acceptance rate, things like that. So talking about strategy with your counselor is going to be a big help for what will be coming ahead.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was awesome.
Yeah. Did you have anything to add?
No, that's perfect. So comprehensive. Thank you. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so let's talk about academics. Junior year is sort of the year. I'm sure for those of you that are juniors, people have been telling this to you already. Like, this is your most important year, keep it up. And it's true. It's true because it is the last full year of academics that a college will see before you're submitting applications. So as it says, obviously, do as well as you can. I feel like, yes, we want your grades to be as strong as you can make them, right? Obviously, you're a human being and it's okay if nothing is perfect, but, and you know, you need to have a balance of life and everything else, but we want as well as it can happen is the goal here. So if you need additional support, this is a year to grab yourself tutors and to really push yourself to maintain a GPA that you feel proud of. It does, like I said, spill over. This junior year is the most important year into that first semester of senior year. That is important as well. Time management will be huge. It is already huge. You are busy high school students. All of you have a lot going on. But imagine that with the addition of test prep and application stuff, right? So time management is so important in this process. It is overwhelming to apply to college emotionally, but also there's just a lot of flying pieces and a lot going on. And so if you can stay ahead of the game with that, what Rielly was saying, keeping organized, communicating, using all the tools at your disposal, and using your time management so that you're not scrambling last minute, sure, you might still be stressed, but it's going to be so much better than being overwhelmed at the last minute before your November 1 deadlines you're submitting on Halloween night. Like, you don't want to be doing that. Also, a component of your application we haven't yet spoken of are your letters of recommendation. It is your responsibility to procure your teachers or anyone else who will be writing your letters of rec by asking them if they will do it. Most colleges, if they accept letters of rec, will get one from your counselor, your school counselor, and then probably 2 academic teachers. We generally recommend you ask 11th grade teachers because they will have known you for a full year and they are the most recent teachers who will have known you in the classroom for a full year. So if you think about November 1st deadline, your senior teachers are going to have known you only for a month and a half or 2 months or something before they're writing this letter. So that's why we like the junior year teachers for that. And they should be from your academic core courses, meaning we're not asking an art teacher or a drama teacher or something like that. We are asking math, science, foreign language, history, English. And you want to think about, as the slide says, who knows you best. So it's cool. A lot of times students have a teacher who's an academic core teacher, but they're also on a sports team and that teacher is also the coach of the team or like might know them in multiple layers like that. That's a really good option. It also, sometimes students think that they need to ask the teachers where they were perfect, right? This is an AP class, it was really challenging and I got an A, so I want to ask this teacher. But it's really important to think about how they know you as a human being, what they'll say about you as someone who will contribute on campus, not just in an academic setting. So it doesn't necessarily mean that a teacher who you got an A from is a better choice than a teacher you got a B from, or maybe started with a B. How great is the story of the letter of rec is, hey, she was, struggling a little at first, but she came in every day after school and asked for help and did extra credit and worked so hard and she got an A. That is a fantastic narrative to have in a letter of rec. So don't feel like you really need to pick the teachers who in your mind will just say like, yep, came to class, did the work, got the A, that's great. Like those often aren't as insightful or powerful as the teachers who really know you or have had an opportunity to know you. So you can start this year, juniors, thinking, thinking as you're in class, like, who might I ask? And it would be a good idea to ask before the end of this school year. And there's nothing to do but ask. And if they say yes, great, then you'll remind them senior year, like, hey, and there'll be some way to officially, formally, ask them through your school. But a lot of teachers, it's a lot of work to write a letter of rec, and they'll have a cap. When I was an 11th grade high school English teacher, they're basically the most asked of all the high school teachers. And I had to cap it at 20 students. I couldn't, it was too much time. And so you want to sort of reserve your slot. So it's nice to think ahead in that way as well. So that's something to be sort of floating in your mind this year, thinking about as a junior. And for sophomores, it's coming up, but you're not gonna, unless you have the same teacher sophomore year and junior year or something, you probably would not ask a sophomore teacher. You can also ask people who aren't educators or who aren't primary academic core course educators to be letters of rec. A lot of colleges have optional letters of rec that you can send that might be from a boss or a coach or an art teacher or something like that. So if you have anyone like that in your world as well that you might ask, you would also ask them sometime junior year. Yeah,
I just want to hop into, I think you covered it, Sarah, but just I used to get a lot of questions about, choosing which academic subjects we should ask, teachers if it should fit your major of interest, how important is that? The truth is this really is insight into your presence in the classroom. And, a lot of times students that are, planning to major in biology have a closer connection with that biology teacher, but that's not necessarily the most important thing to think about here. I think, it can be really nice, even if you're really STEM, oriented, to have a history teacher, an English teacher in there to show that you're capable of, multiple strengths and using kind of both sides of your brain. But it's also, not as much strategy involved in selecting the subject areas, I would say. I think it's more about, who knows you best, who really likes you, and kind of like Sarah said, who's maybe seen you overcome a challenge or seen you, impact a class environment in a particular way. So that's the main thing to think about here, I think, when asking teachers. Just want to add that in.
Totally. Thank you. Okay.
All right, so we will jump in a little bit deeper into testing and kind of the timeline for testing, right? So as Sarah mentioned earlier, you really should ideally have finished Algebra 2 before you're kind of officially, taking your test, because you do need the content from Algebra 2 to be successful on either the SAT or the ACT. So with that in mind, we really like ideally to have standardized test scores sort of squared away by the end of junior year, to free up some time for all that essay crafting, for really finalizing the college list, and actually starting to put those apps together, right? So, kind of like Sarah said earlier, it's okay if it trickles into the fall a little bit, like maybe that August or September sitting, but ideally we want to have in our mind by the end of junior year, we're mostly done with testing, and can kind of turn our attention towards some other things and keep that score in your back pocket, as Sarah said, which I really like. We kind of touched on the different testing policies. A lot of schools are moving to optional testing. Obviously this means your application is complete with or without testing, and you should really only submit if your score kind of falls within the range of that particular school, or looks like a fit for that school. Again, the testing is one component, right? It's one piece of the puzzle. It's one way to signify strength. Obviously does not tell your whole story. And these other pieces are equally, if not more important, as well. So some schools also are kind of, saying they prefer testing, which is still optional, but preferred is a little bit more of a stronger sentiment towards submitting, even if maybe you fall a little bit out of range. They want to see that you took the test, you did your best, and that's an important piece. And then obviously required testing, SAT or ACT scores are a required piece of the application. And yeah, so then kind of our recommendation is definitely to prep for testing. Right. I think standardized tests aren't just an assessment of knowledge or intellect, but of preparation, dedication to improving, kind of learning the exam itself and the timing of things, knowing tips and tricks, and really just getting lots of practice, getting your reps in, and being comfortable when you sit down for the exam. So usually this means, we recommend signing up or registering for 3 to 5 sittings throughout junior year. I know it sounds like a lot, but it's better to kind of be registered, be prepared for those sittings and for that plan. And usually with a month or two in between each sitting to really make sure you have time to kind of look at those places where you maybe lacked last time and focus on improving those places to get some extra points. And so also want to make sure that, if your student has accommodations or is on, an IEP or anything like that, sometimes, extra time is a piece of the puzzle. So make sure you communicate with your counselor before registering for the SAT or ACT on that front. I also just want to note too, that there are registration deadlines for the SAT and ACT. So, there's a late fee if you don't meet the June 20th deadline for like the July 12th ACT, et cetera. So just be aware of registering early. And also sometimes, in some states, it can be a little bit harder to secure a seat as well. Like, California, for example, they fill up very quick. So being aware of when they're releasing those test dates and kind of registering and building your plan ahead of time is definitely important for testing. Anything to add on that, Sarah?
I would just add, one of the reasons we recommend taking the test 3 to 5 times would be because there's something called super scoring, which is when colleges will accept, like, let's say at the SAT, your highest verbal score and your highest math score, even if they're from 2 different testing dates, and add them together as an ultimate score. So that's part of the strategy in taking your test multiple times, because you can say like, well, I got an awesome score on the verbal, I'm just going to tutor math and like really target that for my next sitting or whatever. Yeah.
Totally.
All right.
Awesome. All right. So we kind of touched on activities in school. Let's dive a little bit deeper. So again, this is one of I think people maybe underestimate how important activities are for the admission officers to really kind of distill what you're interested in, how you've pursued, your interests, how you've left an impact in the different levels of community, school, outside of school, maybe even larger scopes as well. But I think, it really contributes to building that narrative and works alongside what you say about yourself in your essays and in your the rest of your application. So it can really be a strong way. Activities really demonstrate, right? They're a clear way of showing your action and your impact. So don't underestimate them. I think part of what we're focusing on with activities specifically in school is leadership, right? It's kind of such a buzzword, such a hot topic. And of course, leadership, it looks great to show increased responsibility over time within a club or a team. This usually signals that your commitment has been recognized and rewarded with more to do, right? And although leadership is great and it's one strong, one example of strength in the activity list, you don't necessarily have to be captain or president of every team or club. So I just want to, take the weight off of that a little bit. Maybe you lead a fundraiser for an issue that's important to you. That's a form of leadership as well, even if it's not kind of formally titled. Maybe you mentor a younger player on a team or impact your school community in a subtler way. Like, for example, I had a student who created a study tool, for to share study resources, and that, kind of can speak as leadership, right, in a different way. So I think the main word really is to think about is impact. How have you impacted your peers, your teammates, your school in general, both in big and maybe subtler ways as well. The next kind of word is initiative, right? So maybe you've started your own clubs or organizations. Maybe you've kind of re-energized or revitalized an older one by bringing new programs or changes to a club. Or maybe you've sought out opportunities that show kind of academic curiosity or community, engagement, community concern. All of these are ways to show you taking initiative about things that you care about and kind of, expanding to your school community outside of just, your essential sort of classroom duties. And AOs will definitely kind of be looking for that throughout the activity chart. And then, academic curiosity, like we talked about. So taking things you're learning in school and sort of finding ways to apply those in meaningful ways in your community is another thing to sort of be thinking about. Like I mentioned, in general, admission officers really like to see sort of consistent commitment to a group or sustained commitment to a group rather than, the tactic of sort of loading up on club senior year so that you can pad that resume. While, the stresses starting to come in senior year, we see that a lot. But the activities ask you to kind of share which years you did the activity, how much time it took up in your week, how many weeks per year, you committed to that. So admission officers can definitely kind of gauge how long you've been committed and how serious you are about that through those subtler components. I also kind of like to talk about depth versus breadth. Sarah, you touched on this beautifully earlier. But I think when thinking about activities, sometimes, one way to show strength or that academic curiosity is to go really deep in one particular interest or area or subject. And some students are really clear about what they're interested in, about their research questions, about, their career path, things like that. Others are not so sure, and that's totally valid, right? And totally okay. So breadth is also a strength in the activity profile. It can be another way to sort of build your narrative, to show, I've explored these different things and kind of refined my interests and figured out what I wanted to do and different ways to apply them. So both are good, both are okay. You don't need both depth and breadth. They're just different ways to sort of build your narrative and show your strengths. And yeah, I think just doing a bit of myth busting too, I feel like parents and students often, kind of want to find the right activity, right? Like what's the one right activity that will get my student into these schools? And the truth really is there's no one right activity. There's no one perfect activity chart. It's so much more about you authentically and like how you spend your time. I think, yeah, there's no perfect formula. And I think often admission officers are truly looking to find the student, while the student, should be focused on authentically putting yourself on the page and spending your time in ways that resonate with you, right? So yeah, some ways to kind of start thinking about, your activities and how to apply, your values and passions is this 5 adjectives exercise that we talk about a lot. So think about 5 words or phrases that describe you, right? And this can also actually kind of get you started on your essays and your narratives as well. A lot of times this is the first moment where students are asked to sort of really dive deep and reflect on their deeper passions, their deeper traits, and things that they care about and ways that they might describe themselves. So this is a really good way to kind of start thinking about that. What are the 5 words that describe you best, and how do your activities sort of show that or reflect that? And this is important throughout the sort of activity planning process and also when it comes time to sort of put them on the application as well. And another, extension of that exercise is like, describe a moment maybe in the last 2 years where you've demonstrated kind of each of those words, each of those traits. So coming up with the ways to describe yourself and also sort of the evidence or demonstration of those traits. And this can really, really prepare you to kind of start tackling that activity list when it comes time.
I would just add, I always have students when I do this adjectives list that they think that the adjectives should be related to academics in some way, and they don't need to be. It can just be like curious or creative or whatever your adjectives. I always find students feeling pressure to put like hardworking or like things like that. And not that those are bad adjectives to pick, but I just like to say, be open to whatever your adjectives are. They're wonderful, Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about activities outside of school, meaning not school affiliated extracurriculars. Okay, so community, the same thing that Rielly mentioned. How have you impacted your community? How have you made your community better? Community service, advocacy, activism, also big buzzwords, much like leadership in terms of college applications. and they're important to include in your activities list, again, if they're authentic to you. So it's important to start thinking about those things as well and including them. And that's not to say, I know it's on this activities outside of school list. You can absolutely do community service with an activity within your school club or whatever too. So thinking about how have you made your community better? How have you impacted your community? And just as a side note, when we say community, doesn't have to be your school community, though it can be. It can be your family. It can be your town or neighborhood. It can be your city, whatever boundary you want to give your community is fair. You can define that as you see fit, but how have you made an impact in supporting or helping or advocating within that community? Okay, they love to hear, admission officers, about what you have done to serve that community. That's big. They love it. Maybe you help out at home, you take care of your younger siblings while your parents are working, or you're responsible for picking up the groceries every week, or maybe your family English isn't the first language for your parents, so you help out translating some things, or sometimes you cook dinner, or you help take care of an elderly family member. Things like that absolutely count and should be mentioned on your activity list. That big word, that word of impact, right? Any space that you're a part of, that you inhabit, like those examples I just said of your home community, right? Or it can get larger, the boundaries. But how have you made an impact in those environments? And it's important to focus on this authenticity here as well. It's not like, this is what colleges are looking for. I'm going to pad my resume with as much volunteerism as possible. It's lovely to help in general, but it's great in terms of your college application if it's authentic to what you care about. And admission officers can tell. And so try to keep that in mind. The admission process is still a human being looking at your application and trying to understand you as a person, right? And they're looking for that connective tissue, that thread between your activities and your essays. Like, who is this person? What do they care about? And so it's nice when that thread exists because you're following something that matters to you. So that's something to think about. So activities beyond school, also important to show what you've done outside of what school has offered you. Okay, so you might be looking and seeking to take advantage of opportunities even outside of the ones that your school has available. So it tells a lot about you when you figure out unique ways to pursue those passions or interests than the ones that are just like, well, I'm interested in business, so I'm in the business club. Not that that's a bad thing to do, but it's really cool reading applications to see students go beyond that and really pursue something that excites them. So a couple tips. Admission officers love part-time jobs. They like the consistency, the responsibility, the idea that often you're collaborative, you're helping other people out, working together as part of a team. Anything you do in your faith-based community is also important to include and valid. And family responsibilities, like I mentioned, and also hobbies. I find a lot of times students are reluctant to put like, I taught myself the guitar or something like that, but that's legitimately a cool accomplishment you have done. It shows interesting things about you. It doesn't matter that you're like, but I haven't really done anything with, like, it's not about that. It's about showing like, look, I'm engaged in the world and pursuing other things that I'm curious or interested in. So all of those things should be included on your activities list. Okay. How do you actually start making your college list now that we've talked all about all this stuff? The number one most important thing is fit, that word fit. And what we mean by that is how you will fit into that college. So what we're looking for is for a college that fits your goals academically, of course, but also community-wise, because you will be a member of that community for 4 years. What qualities do they have? What opportunities do they have? Is it going to help develop you into the person that you hope to be one day, right? Will you feel safe in this community? Will you feel like you fit in? Are there things about it that will inspire you? All of these things, that's what we mean when we say fit. So part of it is figuring out what you want, which is hard. And the best way to do that is research. And research includes, like I already mentioned, visiting schools. Honestly, in my opinion, the more schools you visit, kind of the better, because you're exposed to what's out there. Obviously, to a point, don't go traveling for a year and visit every college. But that's huge. But also, if you can't visit a ton of schools, take those the online tours. When those admission reps visit your high school, go to those info sessions. Look around on these schools' websites, see what they have available. I find it's useful. A lot of times colleges have student-run YouTube channels. You can watch a couple of the videos to get sort of the vibe of what's going on, or the school paper will tell you a little bit about what might be happening on campus. You're looking for the student culture, the community, obviously also the campus feel, like what it looks like matters, right? All these things. Everyone's personal criteria for what is going to make a college the right fit for them is going to be different because every person is different. So there's no like right or wrong in terms of like if a college should be on your list, other than that like personal preference and what will guide you in terms of fit. Obviously, keeping in mind that it also needs to stay balanced, as Rielly mentioned before. Um, so you want to be thinking about all of these things. So what attributes matter, as it says on the slide? Academic, obviously, is a big one. Most students have no trouble thinking of the fact that what academic programs a college offers should be part of deciding where they want to go to college. By the way, it's totally normal and okay if you don't know what you want to study yet, but you should look through the college majors options and the programs and make sure a couple of them seem exciting to you or would push your buttons, because otherwise, why would you be looking to attend that school? But things like location, especially students from California, have found that weather is a huge thing. People always say to me, oh, I like the snow, but it's really different to like the snow when you go on a skiing trip for a week than when you're like waking up and like walking across campus in the snow every day for winter, right? So thinking about things like that, thinking about how far away you want to be from home when it comes time for Thanksgiving. Are you actually flying home every year? Are you staying on campus? Like these things matter. The size of your college community is also huge. It impacts a wide variety of the experiences you might have. There's really tiny colleges. I personally went to a really tiny liberal arts college. One of my classes was three students and my professor, and we met at the coffee shop because it was a morning class and she bought us each a croissant and coffee. And it was like my dream. I was a lit major. We talked about books and drank coffee. It was amazing. But when I tell that story, some of my students are like, oh my gosh, that sounds like a nightmare. What if you didn't do the reading? Like, what if you didn't want to show up to class? There are only 3 of you, like there's no hiding. And then on the flip side, there's students who can't wait to get into sort of the auditorium and hear those lectures and be learning in that capacity. So that's just one example of how size might impact your experience. There's a lot more, but start thinking about, how do I learn the best, right? What size community makes me feel comfortable? Do I want to walk around and maybe not friends with everyone, but sort of recognize everyone I see? Or do I love the idea of being anonymous a little more? Obviously, cost is a huge component in curating your college list. So you need to be, that goes back to what Rielly was saying on whatever slide that was, 2 or 3, about communication, right? Realistically with your family, what can we do here? Let's make sure our list is balanced in terms of options for us with cost as well, right? Do I want to live on campus? If your college is a far distance from home, then maybe you won't be flying home every school break, right? Because financially that's not feasible. So things like that matter. Do you want that big sort of raw experience of a huge stadium and you're going to all the games? Maybe you're joining a Greek fraternity or sorority with the Greek system, or do you want something else? Do you want to be smack dab in the middle of a city? Do you like the idea of being more in nature? All of these things go into fit. And it's really important to start thinking about that as you create that college list. And it's okay to not know the answers to all of those things, right? You're just making your best guess, your best assessment based on your own self-knowledge, and hopefully having the opportunity to take those virtual tours or visit some schools and seeing what works for you, what feels good to you. And every person's criteria is going to be different, right? For some students, they're going to be like, I can't wait to go to the snow, and that'll be like their number one thing. So then the first boundary we're using when we're making that list is only looking at East Coast schools. And then we're going to narrow the scope from there. You know, everyone's going to have a different ranking of criteria and also set of criteria. Okay.
All right. So talking through some ways to actually do some of this research, and I think Sarah, you touched on a few awesome ones like student newspapers, YouTube videos, social media. All of that is a really great way to get a feel for campus life if you can't necessarily, step foot on campus. I also, lots of virtual tours and things online on the college websites and stuff nowadays too. But there are some other kind of tools available specifically to help you assess your own sort of fit with that college as well. So a lot of schools use programs called Naviance or SCORE. Maya Learning is a big one too. So find out from your counselor if your school, you might already know. If not, find out if your school uses some of these because they can be really helpful tools in terms of finding colleges that fit your criteria that we all already sort of talked about. And also helping application management down the road as well. But if you don't have any of these tools at your school, that's totally okay. Big Future on College Board is also a really helpful tool to come up with sort of suggested colleges to check out based on your sort of data points. And then this isn't on the list here, but I also really love a site called niche.com for starting research. So it's not associated with any particular school. And I think that can be helpful sometimes because, going to the school's website, you often get the prettiest picture. It's a marketing strategy. So I think niche.com is great because it gives kind of a high level overview of everything from, admission details to popular majors to campus and student life, student organizations. And it gives an honest sort of assessment from the student perspective as well. There's student polls and things like that. So you can get kind of a feel for how students feel about their campus through niche. I also, college websites are great as well. I think they're good tools for kind of deeper research into specific programs, specific classes, maybe research that professors are doing, and kind of qualities that they have for their academic program or curriculum that usually is a little bit of a later stage of research, but for some students where academics is all that matters, maybe this is an earlier stage as well. So these are just some things to consider. There's also kind of old school books and catalogs. The Fisk Guide to Colleges has been around for a very long time. And then there's another book called Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be, another great recommendation for sort of starting this process and thinking about the research and the fit that Sarah was mentioning. Yeah. Perfect. All right. So we've talked a lot about all these different components, thinking about kind of this upcoming summer, this school year, some things, just some reminders. So course selection is going to be huge. We already kind of talked about this, but making sure to maintain or increase that rigor. We really want, colleges really want to see that you're still, again, hungry for learning, excited to head into college, kind of getting better and better as you go through your 4 years, and the transcript should have sort of an upward trend, ideally. Testing, make sure you're assessing kind of your optional, preferred, required testings for each school, and sort of where your scores fall in relation to, to the school's sort of competitiveness as far as testing. And then, of course, managing your own timeline that we already sort of talked about. Activities, this is kind of your last chance to deepen your engagement, apply for leadership roles, maybe try to expand a certain element of a club or activity you're already involved in. Kind of helpful to think, what mark do I want to leave on this space or community I've contributed to? What problems have I seen in my experience with this club or activity, and what solutions are possible? Kind of a nice way to leave your sort of legacy in high school, then also, transition into demonstrating that on your college apps as well. We already talked quite a bit about activities, outside activities, but, sustaining maybe your part-time job. Are there any opportunities for internships or kind of shadowing experiences in your social circle with family, friends, and friends' parents and things like that? Can we deepen your case for a specific major? And then also maybe you've come up with your own research questions or your own projects, and this is a chance to really kind of bring those to fruition before you put your best foot forward on the applications. And also you can actually start creating your Common App as well. So, kind of it's similar to testing. The longer you're in there, the more you're familiar with it, I think the better experience you'll have. So kind of creating your Common App, filling in basic info, seeing how the activity chart looks. This is kind of a pro tip, but each section of the Common App allows you to preview the PDF format of it as well. So I definitely recommend using that button. There's a lot of kind of weird formatting that goes in the Common App. So use that preview to make sure everything looks clean and professional. And you can kind of start playing around with that really, really anytime. So, and then of course there's essays, which we're going to talk a little bit deeper about for these last 5 minutes. But essays are a huge, huge piece of the puzzle, really tie everything together in your own words and your own voice. And so planning, to write your personal statement, to write the different supplemental essays that go to each school, it really does take a lot of kind of self-motivation, self-reflection, and organization for sure. So we'll talk a little bit more about that now.
All right. So timeline, as Rielly just said, is huge for a successful essay writing experience, to make sure you have plenty of time to ensure you're using all the pieces of your application to really flesh out and share your full story. You want to feel like you're submitting your best work, right? Which is why time management is so important. You don't want to be scrambling and like submitting things at the last minute and going like, oh, I wish I had time to review this more or to make changes or whatever. So this is the basic timeline to keep in mind. The Common App usually publishes the personal statement prompts, which is your main big essay that will go to every college you apply to via the Common App in February. And then as it says, Common App rolls over to the class of 2026 or class of 2027, whatever the next class is, on August 1st. So it will update you to like, oh, I'm the class of whatever. And then on August 1, colleges will begin releasing their own specific essay supplements. So each college you apply to via the Common App has an opportunity to ask additional essay questions that just go directly to that one college who is asking them. Those are your supplementary essays. A lot of colleges ask for 1 or 2 or none, but some ask for a bunch. And so depending on what your college list looks like, the workload you may have coming up for supplements will vary. But you can start looking on your Common Application beginning August 1st for those prompts, for those essay supplements. They'll slowly, some schools release them August 1, some it's a little bit later, whatever, but around that time, you'll start accruing them. Sometimes they're also on the school website ahead of time. But what that means is that you should plan on using August, September, October, because again, a lot of your apps will be due November 1, for writing those supplemental essays that you're hoping to submit by that November 1st deadline, which then means if you're going backwards, it would be awesome to use your summer to write your personal statement and have that done or pretty close to done, maybe final edits, maybe you have a draft going, whatever, before that August, September, October, so that all you're needing to focus on are those supplementary essays your fall of senior year. Okay, so that's why that number 4, March to July, brainstorm, edit, draft, re-edit, draft again, re-edit, 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 that personal statement. When that is done, it's huge, because that feels like a really big component and a really big time commitment in terms of applying to college. So I really recommend you use that summer to do that. Okay, so the personal statement, like I said, will go to every college, most every college you apply to via the Common App. And it is as the name suggests, personal narrative. It is meant to reveal who you are, or a piece of who you are as a human being. Like I said at the beginning, that quantitative versus qualitative. So this is a place where you are meant to reveal something about who you are. So that means that you have to write about yourself, which is weird and uncomfortable for a lot of students. And it takes a while to kind of get your footing with it. So that's why we're saying, like, give yourself room to breathe here. Almost every student is like, this feels kind of weird. And like, there's a little bit of a struggle moment. And also the hardest part by far is figuring out what you're going to write about. So you want to leave yourself plenty of time to do all of that. The point of the college essay is to reveal, like I said, a little bit about who you are as a person, which then means maybe they're able, admission officers, to assess your fit to their school. That's a little bit what they're trying to see there. So thinking about who you are, it can go back to those 5 adjectives Rielly was mentioning before. Like, if I had to tell someone stuff about me, not like accomplishments about me, but stuff about who I am, how would I describe myself? And then how can I pick a subject to write about that shows a college that I am that type of person? So you don't want to tell an admission officer that you're some type of person, you want to show them. That's a very big thing. So meaning like you don't want to write your personal statement like, dear admission officer, I am so smart, right? Or you want them to read a story about you and go like, wow, that kid's really whatever the adjective is that you've chosen. So they're learning about it with you as they read your story. Okay. So as this says, our essays are thesis driven, not activity driven. What we're getting at by that is that exact idea of like, if your thesis is like, I am compassionate or whatever your adjective. And obviously, I would say a lot of stories you tell about yourself don't just show one thing about you, right? There's going to be some collective other adjectives built into the story as well, which is fine, but you're going to sort of pick a main idea of like, I want to communicate XYZ about myself to my colleges, okay? You need to ask yourself, what does this story say about me, right? What am I telling them? Aside from like the facts that you're telling them, right? Like sort of underneath the page, what is going on here? What am I communicating? What are my themes, kind of, if you're thinking about it in terms of like how you think about literature in English class, right? What do you want them to learn about you? Like if you were saying, this is who I am, this is what I've learned, this is how I show up, this is how I'll contribute to a community. Like you're trying to illustrate those things about yourself with this idea, with this story, okay? So you want to show who you are rather than tell, like I said. It's also great to avoid things that they will already have learned about you in the application itself. So that doesn't mean if you're a soccer player that you can't write about soccer in your essay. Like it's not like forbidden to talk about an activity in your essay. But what I mean is that you must go deeper. You can't just say the facts that they've learned about you as a soccer player from the app. You have to talk about how you've grown as a human being by being on the soccer team. Give specific stories or moments that illustrate some quality you have from soccer, whatever, something like that. So you must go much deeper and fuller than like just the facts of the accomplishments, which will be what the component is on the application itself, okay? You probably don't want to mention your GPA, your grades, these kind of accomplishment-based things. You want to, this is your opportunity to tell them something, like I keep saying, deeper, something about who you are, right? As opposed to what you've done, okay? We've been talking about this a lot. Rielly's mentioned it a lot too. Authenticity is so important. Think about how everything builds in the application. This essay is a part of that puzzle, right? A part of the story you're telling. It's how many essays have admission officers read? How many applications have they looked at? They know what teenagers sound like. They want it to sound like you. They want it to feel like you. They want to read it and feel some sort of human connection to you so that they can advocate for you to get into their college. They want to care. That's what they're looking for. So it doesn't need to be like, I'm writing about my biggest accomplishment of all time and like bragging and telling them all these things about why I'm great. Often those smaller moments, those deeper connections can be more impactful. You have 650 words to write this essay. That's not a lot to like be like, I am this person, right? Like it's kind of maybe sounds like a lot at the jump, but once you start writing it, you're like, oh, wow, this is not as much as I thought. So you want to make sure you are fully telling the story that you want to tell. So one of the biggest pieces is to just write your story and then you can cut down the words. If you trim up front or if you're cognizant of your word count, you won't, you'll chop off your story at the end or you'll miss something that you're looking for. keep asking yourself, what does this say about me? Right? How am I being authentic? Am I telling my honest truth? Okay. Nobody's expecting you to be completely perfect. You can say, like, and I'm still learning about this, or I'm still growing with this. It doesn't need to be like the end, pretty bow, hooray. That's okay. Everyone understands that you're a teenager and people are evolving and growing and learning. They just want to understand you, and you want to show them whatever piece of yourself that you have that you're most proud of, basically. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. I'll just add, that was really amazing, Sarah. Perfect. I completely agree. I'll just say too, from the admission side, this really is like chronologically, the last component. So trust as a writer that they've seen your awards, they've seen your accomplishments, they've seen the numbers, the quantitative pieces, they've seen the test scores, they've analyzed your transcript, they've looked deeply at your activity chart. And so try not to repeat any of those components. You have 650 words to expand on those things, or maybe tie those things together somehow and explain the motivation for, the sort of story the other pieces have told. So, yeah, just really want to emphasize that piece. Try not to drop GPAs or numbers or things here, because they will already have that sort of in their mind as they're coming into your essay. So just want to drive that home for sure. Okay, so thinking about the Common App, we've already kind of talked about a lot of these things, but I think the first real step for completing the Common App is gathering your materials, right? It's always good to have a copy of your most recent transcript on hand. You'll have to kind of put those details into your Common App. Keeping sort of a running list of academic awards or honors that you've received, so Dean's List, honor roll, maybe National Honor Society, things, any kinds of awards that you've received throughout your 4 years. Try to keep track of that, because it's easy to just sort of, forget those little things, and they really do matter, on the application as well. Same with activities. I think, starting a list of things that you do now and keeping notes about details and roles for each of those activities is really great, because then you have all of the kind of facts and things to choose from when it comes time to actually inputting those into the application. So I always tell my students to take tons of notes. If your involvement in this club or your leadership led to more members, like how many more members were there? Keep track of those kind of little data points and details that can really help demonstrate your impact or involvement in a club. And you might not be able to put every single thing into the application, but then you have all the things that you need when it comes time to sit down and do that. Obviously, keep your test score results on hand. I think keep your College Board login or your ACT website login handy, because you'll need to kind of review and assess your scores frequently. And this is sometimes the toughest piece for my students, is parent and guardian information. So there's a full family section on the application, and often this is kind of the one piece that students can't do by themselves. You need to know kind of where your parents are from, their educational background, details about their work, things like that. So I think, it's usually easiest to kind of sit down and do this together, but, kind of be aware that you're going to have to gather some information about people other than yourselves as well. And then we already sort of talked about it, but I think you can create a Common App account anytime really, and kind of get in there. You can even start adding colleges to see, what they asked about last year on their application. Just be aware that, they roll over on August 1st each year. So there'll be a new sort of application in there. Oftentimes they don't change too much from year to year, but sometimes they do. So I think, you can definitely use that to review what they were asking the year before, and to get a feel for what you might be expected to write about, or, the additional questions that they ask. But for the most part, you want to kind of be aware of that August 1st date. And then, yeah, there's also the opportunity to invite others to sort of help you with your application. So you can invite an advisor, a parent, college counselor, to get in there and help preview your components. And a little bit later down the road as well, you'll be inviting your recommenders and your counselor as well to submit their documents on the Common App. But that's kind of later on, I think, more in the fall of senior year. So those are the things to be thinking about now. We've really driven this home, I think, but couple last helpful tips. So really give yourself time, make sure you kind of come up with a schedule and stick to it, right? For getting all these different components completed. We talked about the test prep timeline, how to start building, activities in sophomore, junior year, and also how to kind of plan for your essays and your essay writing. So really, really keep track of that and hold yourself accountable for that. We've really talked about authenticity a lot, but just really want to drive that home. Really thinking about your application as kind of a puzzle, and there's individual pieces that should sort of come together to paint a full picture, right? I think try not to repeat too much on the application. Admission officers are trained to grab the important details and kind of compile them as you go. So think about that while you're doing it as well. Really focus on showing them who you are, not what you expect they are looking for, because I think they can sort of sense that. As Sarah mentioned, it's a very, very human process, and definitely kind of trying to read between the lines to get a stronger sense of who you are. So put that out there for them to pick up, if that makes sense. And yeah, I would say, don't rely on spell check. It's really good I already talked about the previewing of the different components of the Common App. I think proofread everything really carefully. It's helpful sometimes to take a step away and then come back to it with fresh eyes. You can ask a trusted adult to proofread your essays as well. We do try to avoid having too many cooks in the kitchen when it comes to writing. Too many opinions can sometimes steer away that personal narrative. So be thoughtful and mindful of how many people and also who you ask to help kind of review your essays. And then, of course, reviewing college requirements and keeping track of, is testing required here? How many letters of rec will I need for this school? Do they accept optional letters of rec from bosses, coaches, people outside? And then, kind of, do they accept only official test scores? Can I self-report my test scores? These are all sort of questions to add to that giant spreadsheet or that giant Post-it note that we talked about in the beginning. Really try to keep track of those things. Another one is interviews. Some schools require interviews. It's not as common, but some have optional interviews, and that can be another piece to just build your candidacy too. So just being aware of kind of all the different things that you can give a college to assess. And yeah, I think that's the last one is applying before the deadline. So as Sarah mentioned already too, it's nice to plan ahead to make room for any technical error, technical difficulties. No, we don't want to be the victims of any like websites crashing or anything. So just planning ahead for sure, and making sure you have plenty of time to review before you submit and feel really good about it. All right, I think that's it. Sorry we went a bit over time. I do have one last tiny poll for those of you who stuck with us. Thank you so much. So let me do our follow-up poll really fast. Just 3 quick questions for us. And thank you. If anyone has any questions, you can also drop them in the Q&A. So thank you so much for sticking with us for the extra 15 minutes.
Thanks, guys.
Perfect. We'll just let this go for a second. All right. All right, I think we can close it down. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Sarah, thank you so much. You're an amazing partner, and good luck with this college process. We appreciate you all.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, Rielly.
Thank you. Have a good one.